There are a small number of people who are born into a gender that they don't identify with, and I will treat them with dignity and respect.
Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has backed the banning of trans women from women's sports.
There's abuse of vilification and violence against trans people on a daily basis.
Women are protected by their biological sex, that sex is real, and that women can now feel safe that services and spaces designated for women are for women.
It's bloody brilliant.
A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity.
I think the way the media are dealing with this is completely wrong, and it resonates almost with the old Section 28 debate. Same argument, same challenging, same characterisation, same stereotyping, if you like. And in years to come, we will look back at this period and say that the way this issue was dealt with was completely wrong, just as we look back now at Section 28 and know that that was completely wrong.
The Equality and Human Rights Commission has abandoned trans guidance for schools after academics and parents raised serious concerns.
Do I fight back?
Where do you stand on transgender and transgender rights?
I start with biology.
Fight back.
They've got to go over the Golden Bridge and they'll pretend they were never on the wrong side. And hello, Anas, hello, welcome to Team Turf.
Fight back.
Transgender women in the UK are facing new restrictions and outright bans.
Fight back.
From participating in women's sports to using bathrooms that match their gender identity. LGBTQ+ advocacy groups now saying an April Supreme Court decision could lead to a blanket ban affecting trans people across the country.
Fight back.
Can't you see the tears we're crying?
One of the old Robin Hood ballads, one which goes back possibly as far as the 14th century, The Guest of Robin Hood, begins with Little John, Robin's once and future right-hand man, asking Robin how he and their gang of outlaws, pushed out of society and targeted by the crown and the law, should treat people. Where shall we rob? Where shall we reave? Where shall we beat and bind? In a short passage, Robin Hood, the legendary outlaw, gives a response that starts off sounding almost New Testament, but ends, though these stories predate the Diggers and the Luddites and certainly the Marxists by hundreds of years, with the sharp tongue of a man engaged in class struggle. Robin, a hero made the enemy of the state by the tyranny of the English elite, knows who his enemies and his friends are. He replies to his companion as such. But look ye do no husband harm, that tilleth with his plough. No more ye shall know God ye man, that walketh by Greenwood shaw. Ne no knight, ne no squire, that will be a good fellow. These bishops and these archbishops, ye shall them beat and bind. The High Sheriff of Nottingham, him hold ye in your mind. This is a video about how transgender people are being outlawed.
Do you think we might have finally reached peak trans? I know there's been a lot of false dawns on this question, but is this potentially, the big one?
I do think it is. I really do, because what it's done is it's flipped the default. Anybody who has any policy that's based on sex, whether they are an employer who has toilets and changing rooms, whether they're an NHS hospital that has single-sex wards, whether they're a sporting authority that runs women's and men's competitions, is unless you are running those on the basis of biological sex, you have no legal backing for what you are doing. You will be challenged and you will lose.
In April this year, in a case brought by a transphobic hate group to the UK Supreme Court, a body that only exists because Tony Blair has wet dreams imagining himself as an American in the same way transphobes imagine trans people do about gender, the UK effectively made the decision that trans people should be banned from bathrooms, banned from changing rooms, banned from hospital wards, and not just from those spaces that align with their gender either, but also from those spaces that match their gender assigned at birth, because it might cause distress.
I'm very, very, very angry. I'm so angry. I sometimes think this thing can't make me any angrier, and then it makes me angrier.
It's an extraordinary thing, the capacity this has to make me angry.
Funny that they never asked any trans people if this decision caused us any distress. I wonder what that's about.
It's clear that Keir Starmer's Labour is not safe for trans people.
In a move that should outrage pretty much everyone to the left of Donald Trump, the Labour government declared that trans people were persona non grata, banned from bathrooms, changing rooms, any space designated women's only or men's only, and under increased pressure in any public place that could be construed as somewhere where their existence made people unsafe, or where people might potentially claim they are making them feel unsafe. Trans people, now legally barred from using public restrooms, were essentially outlawed from existing in public, since we don't have a unique power to hold our pee for 8 hours. All under the leadership of the leader of our so-called left-wing party, turned a cabal of useful idiots for ushering in fascism, Sir Keir Starmer.
You're actually contributing to the forces that are slowly pulling our country apart.
Sorry, I mean Sir Keir Starmer.
The return of the sausages.
That's right, former top cop of the UK, the human rights lawyer who thinks Israel have the right to withhold food and water from Palestinians.
A siege is appropriate? Cutting off power, cutting off water?
Well, I think that Israel does have that right.
And the British Labour Party's very own king of the ashes, Sir Keir Starmer.
We risk becoming an island of strangers.
Because I've had enough of this dude.
This court decision was terrifying, and it stayed terrifying, even as J.K. Rowling celebrated on a super yacht in the Mediterranean with a cigar and alcohol, obviously delighted, tweeting, "I love it when a plan comes together," just in case there was anyone left in the country that hadn't yet accepted that she'd become a mustache-twirling Saturday morning cartoon villain. In the wake of this decision, the UK's Equalities Board, long since occupied by the most bigoted people in the country, following Liz Truss's brief few weeks in office before she was soundly defeated in single combat by a lettuce, released provisional guidance on how to enforce this obviously unenforceable bathroom ban, which had been proved unenforceable when tried in a number of states in the USA in the previous decade, notably North Carolina. But the UK is nothing, if not an island ruled over by some of the most insufferable briefcase-wielding bigots who refuse to learn a single lesson from the past. And so, in what only makes sense as a decision designed to exterminate trans people and hand over power to Nigel Farage, a man who on every other issue in the country will do much worse to pretty much everyone, but is somehow further to the left than the Labour government on this issue, the government pushed through with this decision, and instructed the EHRC to construct their final guidelines post-haste. And by that I mean with an unusually short deadline and without listening to any of the things trans people might have had to say about their rights being curtailed. And I mean that literally. The consultation period, reduced to an unprecedentedly short period of time, was extended extremely slightly in what must have been an attempt to limit the amount of feedback from enraged people watching the government strip an entire minority group of their rights. And still, there were apparently so many complaints even in that time that even though this is literally against the law, they used an AI to filter the responses and dismissed 50% of the bastards. I wonder whose responses they unlawfully scrapped to justify the decision. Which half got lost? Surprise, surprise!
That's a big surprise!
The guidance did not reflect the apparent 50,000 responses made to the consultation following the EHRC's suggestion that trans people of all genders be banned from both men's and women's toilets and more. Campaigners have accused the EHRC of ignoring their views because it used artificial intelligence to categorise the replies to the consultation. Insiders said this was a practice that had been rolled out across government departments to save civil servants time. A source at a national LGBT organisation familiar with the guidance said, "The EHRC received 50,000 responses to its consultation, and to consider them all in the past 27 working days, that would have required reviewing over 1,850 submissions a day. This is an extraordinarily short time frame, especially given the number of complex legal questions raised by businesses, organisations and the public. The speed with which the EHRC must have addressed each of the serious concerns, which included questions of compatibility with existing legislation, will be somewhat surprising to those that have spent many hours engaging with this process." On top of this obvious disregard for the opinions of the very people that will be affected by the stuff, the leaked EHRC guidance went even further than the draft guidance, and will effectively put pressure on employees of trans people, people in charge of any public space, and a whole load of other people to constantly police the people attending gendered spaces, making sure to check the crotches of anyone entering their establishment and ready to demand to see birth certificates, which no one in the UK carries and which half of us couldn't even locate at any notice. Normal Ireland, you want to piss? Better show some ID, or you'll have to piss in the street, get arrested for pissing in the street, and then go to the prison most likely to make you want to end it. That's the kind of punitive logic that makes Britain great. Staff at facilities where trans people are suspected of using the toilet will now be required to make inquiries about a person's birth sex or legal changes made to their gender, according to The Times, a transphobic rag to which the EHRC leaked, or rather proudly announced, the new and exciting ways we are to suffer. They told The Times that this wouldn't be discrimination as long as it's done in a sensitive way. I'm not sure that's how the law puts it. And how the fuck can you pull someone out of a toilet and demand to see their genitalia in a sensitive way? Well, apparently, there are legitimate ways of doing this, according to The Times. And also, trans women using women's toilets is now, apparently, discrimination? How is me peeing in a locked stall and then washing my hands and leaving while avoiding eye contact with absolutely everyone discriminating against anyone? The Times understands that the guidance is still being finalised, and it will not decree that services have to provide single-sex spaces, but that if they do, if a lavatory is intended for women, transgender women would be excluded from using it. To allow someone of the opposite sex to use the facilities would be very likely to amount to unlawful discrimination. Never mind that this violates the Gender Recognition Act, but carrying on. It will also make clear that it will not be deemed as discrimination to exclude trans people from those facilities, and that services will be allowed to request birth certificates to ensure single-sex services are protected. The draft guidance also said that, in certain circumstances, a trans person could be excluded from a service even if it matched their biological sex. It read, "A legitimate aim for excluding a trans person from a separate or single-sex service for their own biological sex might be to prevent alarm or distress for other service users. A trans man might be excluded from the women-only service if the service provider decides that, because he presents as a man, other service users could reasonably object to his presence, and it is a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim to exclude him." The leaked guidance from the UK's Equality and Human Rights Commission makes it clear that trans people will be barred from toilets, both male and female, in case we cause distress. And these bans extend to public spaces of all stripes, by the sheer fact that people just need to pee. It also opens up a massive can of worms in which discrimination against trans people is de facto legal, and objections to trans people in any space you could make the argument is gendered or is inappropriate for trans people to be in, or just something you'll be in long enough that you might need to pee at some point, given we are seen by transphobes as basically super nonces, would likely be turned into a horror show. Like with the case recently in M&S, where asking a cis woman if they need help as a person working there that's their job to ask people if they need help is treated as if it's a hate crime. J.K. Rowling is now demanding this shop be boycotted because they hired a trans person. This will get worse and worse, now that J.K. Rowling is openly throwing her billions of dollars in Harry Potter money at anyone that even occasionally thinks about suing a trans person. This will not end until we are exterminated. And if they cannot do this through banning us from public, then they will ban our healthcare. Sorry, the rest of our healthcare. And if that doesn't stop us, then they'll go on to force detransitioning. Or at least, people like Rowling will try. And for those of you who don't pay much attention to trans issues and think I'm being hyperbolic, let me break it down for you. This is not just a bathroom ban. This is a de facto ban on trans people being able to exist in public. Think about it like this. If you cannot use the bathroom at work, you cannot go to work. People cannot just hold their pee for 8 hours, plus however long it takes you to go from home to work and back. If you cannot use the bathroom in the shops, you are de facto banned from shopping. If you cannot use any gendered ward in a hospital, then, if your hospital isn't big enough to have isolated wards, which most of them aren't, then you are de facto banned from that hospital. If you work in a job with only gendered bathrooms, and your presence is objected to in either, which is allowed in this guidance and apparently isn't discrimination, then you cannot use the bathroom at work, and thus you cannot go to work. In a dispute between a trans person and an employee that makes this a problem, is your boss going to get planning permission to build a separate toilet, which the last government tried to make more difficult in an attempt to also be transphobic? Or would it be cheaper, and now apparently not discrimination, to fire your trans employee? Is this discrimination? Well, what does discrimination against trans people even mean anymore if trans people can be excluded from men's toilets and women's toilets if you can't reassign your gender as says in the Gender Recognition Act? And the law requires that anyone who looks 1 degree less fishy than Sabrina Carpenter needs their birth certificate checked before they're allowed to pee. If you cannot use public facilities, you are de facto banned from public. Even at this level of trans exterminationism, it's clear that making life worse and worse for us to try and make more and more of us either detransition or pass away is the plan. The gender critical movement has money now, and they've decided they will keep burning it until there is not a single trans person left in public life. Every trans person out in public is a failure of their activism, because, as arch turf and friend of pretty much every activist involved in this said, every trans person, whether they're happily transitioned or not, is a difficulty, who needs special accommodations, and is a huge problem to a sane world.
We have to try to limit the harm, and that means reducing or keeping down the number of people who transition, and that's for 2 reasons. One of them is that every one of those people is a person who's been damaged. But the second one is every one of those people is basically, you know, a huge problem to a sane world. Like, if you've got people that, and whether they're transitioned, whether they're happily transitioned, whether they're unhappily transitioned, whether they're detransitioned, if you've got people who've dissociated from their sex in some way, every one of those people is someone who needs special accommodation in a sane world where we re-acknowledge the truth of sex. And I mean, the people who've been damaged by it, the children who've been put through this, those people deserve every accommodation we can possibly make. But every one of them is a difficulty. So the fewer of those people there are, the better in the sane world that I hope we will reach.
Using the money from both the state and the sales of the new Harry Potter audiobooks and TV show, while many people are having a taste of nostalgia to fuel our erasure, we shall be outlawed from attending women's events and men's events, even if everyone there likes us and wants us to be there. We will be targets for harassment and intimidation if we appear in public in a way that makes any person uncomfortable, and we will be required to present a birth certificate to enter these public spaces, something no one carries around with them and something that can be changed, but that very few trans people go through the lengthy and dehumanizing process of changing. And even then, if it can be proven that we have changed it, we're still liable. Trans people are set to be made outlaws in our own country. What is our crime? There is no crime. Our crime is existing in a way the state does not approve of. Like the mythical Sheriff of Nottingham, Keir Starmer, a man who once posed as a socialist and a human rights lawyer, happily strips us of our rights to live in society, to live with our family, to live with our friends, with rights to housing and jobs, which could be on the line since this guidance effectively undermines trans people's rights under the Equality Act to be legally protected against discrimination, from bosses, from landlords, from authorities. And like the outlaws that the Sheriff of Nottingham made their enemy, the aim is to drive us out of society in general, out of eyesight, and into the woods, where we will be marked as criminals and prevented from living alongside those we love in a country that we once called home. In the nomenclature of some medieval ballads, we are going to the Greenwood, a refuge for those cast out by the authorities and forced to live in exile from their communities. To go to the Greenwood is to become an outlaw. But today's Britain is depleted, ravaged by deforestation, scarred by the satanic mills of the Industrial Revolution, and dealt a final blow by the deprivation of Thatcherism. There are no third spaces. There is nowhere to go that isn't home or work. No forest to leave to. The imagery of the Greenwood, of a wild place that paradoxically invokes a sense of freedom and also of exile. The wilderness as a beautiful prison for someone cast out of society. or it was that. The Greenwood and the tales of medieval outlaws like Robin Hood or Hereward, as the book The Ecology of the English Outlaw puts it, represents a lost England, imagined as pristine and forested. But even this is a result of romanticization. The forest could be dense, dangerous, and as an outlaw, you were never safe from the authorities if they found you. In modern Britain, our concrete forests are no safe haven. And depending on the final form the EHRC guidance takes, any public space might be the place someone chooses to come for you. Shops and gyms will be included in its scope, but the guidance also extends to government departments, the NHS and prisons. It covers private organisations or charities if they are providing a public service. For example, a private care home providing care on behalf of a council. So there you go. A 90-year-old trans woman will be removed from the toilet by a gang of muscular law-enforcing gender cops because she's obviously, by the sheer fact of her existence, a violent danger to everyone around her. By existing as a trans person, she's basically just outed herself as a predator in the eyes of the state. Seriously, that is the thinking here. Our existence anywhere is seen as a threat, the same way that gay people were at the height of the AIDS crisis. Except now, this horrific bigotry and legalized discrimination is being done by people that throw pride parties in the Downing Street garden, that claim to be allies and say they're fighting to protect queer people, that post on Trans Day of Visibility. Just look at the days-long hate campaign currently being waged against an anonymous employee at M&S just for doing her job. A trans person, even in their capacity as a professional, doing as they are ordered, being observed in public, is only a tweet away from being in the heart of a media shitstorm, risking their job, their ability to exist in public without harassment and abuse, and whatever punishment Keir Starmer and the EHRC decide that we deserve for existing too close to those who hate us. An outlaw is then, in this day and age, effectively pressured into a form of house arrest. That is, if you choose to obey.
Whenever the history books are kept, they'll call him the phony King of England.
The Robin Hood legends form a part of a corpus of outlaw stories which date from around the reign of King John. Two other key outlaws, Fulk Fitzwarren and Eustace the Monk, were historical figures whose lives can be clearly identified at this time, but Robin Hood himself is much more problematical. What is striking about these stories is that they reveal that, in an age when the rule of law was respected as the foundation of good government, those who put themselves outside the law had become popular heroes. This is in complete contrast to public perceptions of the outlaw at the beginning of King Henry II's reign, and shows that the existing order had come to be regarded as tyrannical. Tyranny was the abuse of law. If the existing order was founded on the arbitrary will of evil men who could twist the law to their own ends, then it was the role of the outlaw to seek redress and justice by other means. If we're talking about legal means of fighting back against this madness, I can guarantee that court challenges will come. The Good Law Project is already starting this ball rolling and will be heard later this year. And given this guidance runs counter to the European Court of Human Rights, to which the UK is still a signatory, and that this guidance is, no matter what the government and the EHRC might exist, in breach of, if not the Equality Act itself, the Gender Recognition Act, which itself only exists because the UK got lambasted by the European Court of Human Rights previously for lacking any legal protections for trans people during the Blair era, the last time the Labour Party was in charge, and the last time that they were a bunch of austerity-loving weirdos who only care about making rich people richer and spilling the blood of millions in the Middle East. Funny that. Thing is, these court cases will take time. A lot of time. The law and lawyers and the courts move slower than Keir Starmer deciding whether to recognise a Palestinian state while he actively participates in its destruction. And even then, we don't know if it will work. I hope it will, especially because the law is actually on our side in this case, for now. But if I've learned anything from the absolutely evil shit that's led us to this point, it is, to paraphrase a favourite saying of the Labour right, things can always get worse. So, in the meantime, in a phrase that will probably make Keir Starmer shit his pants, What is to be done? These bishops and these archbishops, ye shall them beat and bind. The High Sheriff of Nottingham, him hold ye in your mind. If we are to go to the Greenwood, we must do what the legendary outlaws of old did in the stories. Do not lie down and take it. Fight back. If the existing order is founded on the arbitrary will of evil men who could twist the law to its own ends, then it is the role of the outlaw to seek redress and justice by other means. Fight back. Fight to take the power and our dignity back from the powerful, from the sheriffs and the archbishops and the usurper kings and those who would lead us to the gallows, and at the same time never forget, while we are sure who we must fight, who we are and what it is we are fighting for. A world of solidarity, where all people stand together. An agreement across society that no one is free until everyone is free. A world against discrimination and occupation, and not only fascism, but the damnable economic system that has birthed fascism now 2 centuries in a row. It must be uprooted, to give way to a world where each can give according to their ability and receive according to their need. A world where no one goes hungry or homeless or without care. A world where disabled people, black people, trans people, Muslims, everyone can live without fear. And in a society that treasures us all, not despite our differences, but because of them. A world where we can reconcile the idea of an outlaw hero, where stealing from the rich and giving to the poor is unquestionably the right and moral thing to do. As we all know it to be, we celebrate these stories for a reason. Instead of a world where aid and services and rights are taken from the poor, from minorities, from those suffering, and the spoils handed to billionaires and lobbyists and the foremost brown noses of our spineless politicians, where we don't have to put up with a country where millions make it known that we support Palestine, while our government actively works to raze it to the ground and lies about how much they care on TV, while cozying up to the Hitlers of our generation and arresting people for protesting it. An outlaw is cast out, yes, but they are also given purpose by that casting out. In going to the Greenwood, we learn to use the cover of darkness, the height of the trees, the roughness of the terrain, the denseness of the forest to fight back. By pushing people into the shadows, by stripping them of everything and casting them out, you leave people with little to lose. And you make them more and more determined to fight, to clear their names, to bring justice to an unjust world, to recreate a home where they can be home again, and not just fight to come home, but to make that home a safe place, a place you would be proud to come home to, a place that welcomes us and recognizes us as belonging in it. Already protests have been huge. Trans marches in London and across the UK with numbers so vast the photographs can't do them justice. Actions at Wes Street and constituency office. But those have to just be the start. There are no signs of letting up by the regime, and if the next one is who it looks like it's going to be, it's not going to get any better from here, at least not without a serious fight. The government has made it clear that when we come out in numbers, when we show ourselves and demand to be heard, that they not only ignore us, but they actively stick the knife in further. And recently, they've begun to twist that knife. We cannot let them win. They cannot win. We will not go away. We have persistence on our side, and we will not stand down. Death before detransition. Lately, I felt ashamed of not being in the UK, not being out in the street where I come from, fighting this on the ground. Every day I read what's happening and feel like it's my duty to be there in person, to be actively trying to claw our rights back from these demons in charge, and, well, isn't it? I get homesick a lot. I miss my friends, my family, my city. As much as I do rip the shit out of Britain for a living, I miss Nottingham in my bones. That's my home. And I can't fucking stand to see how it's being made inhospitable for people like me because of a fucking children's author of all people that got radicalized on Twitter and by the brainless shower of bastards in power who hunger to do whatever will cause the most pain and suffering at any given time. When I left Britain, part of the reason I did so was because I was scared. Because the atmosphere was so oppressive towards trans people. And since then, it's only gotten worse and worse. And sometimes, a lot of the time, maybe even most of the time, I feel like an exile. That I've gone to the Greenwood. And the longer I'm here, the more I yearn to do what people in the Greenwood are supposed to do. To come out of hiding and to fight. Sur les jolies fumbrées, la nuit a fausseté, n'est nul malais. On le bois de belles regards, où vole léger, et chante, ruisseau, toujours sans délai. Je prie ton bon Jean que pour moi voiler, pour que je puisse à mon pays aller et chevaucher. Outlaws were often victims of oppression, especially when legal processes were subject to the pressure of powerful interests. An early 14th century poem expresses this very vividly. The poem was about the way in which false accusers and interested persons could have a guiltless enemy flung into prison to await the travelling justices. The only remedy for the innocent was felt to be not to wait for the trial, but to go to the woods. This poem is no lyric, however. Life as an outlaw in the woods was not really merry or carefree. The outlaw wants to go home. The outlaw in the wood remembers those who are oppressors and who are his friends. The outlaw wants to go home. But home no longer exists. Not as it was. That home, the idea of a safe place, with friends and family by your side, where you can live your authentic self in happiness and peace. Was that ever real? Or was it all just a dream? Home was always imperfect. Home was always somewhere that loved us despite, not because, even in its best moments. Hate does not come from nowhere. The seeds of what Britain is now have always been there, and they barely lay dormant for but a few years before growing into mighty trees. Enough trees to form a new Greenwood, into which we, under our new sheriff, are to be banished. But it's still my fucking home, you know? There is no deceit there, nor any bad law. In the wood of Beauregard, where the jay flies, and the nightingale always sings without ceasing, I beg all good people they pray for me, that I may go riding to my own country. Hey, thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. If you liked it, give it a like, leave a comment, subscribe, and tell all your friends. And help me survive, because I am poor and I need money to live. Give me £2,000, give me out that lovely overdraft, or give me a smaller amounts of money if you don't have them like most people. Either way, you can give me that money on Coffee or PayPal, links below as always, or sign up to my Patreon or YouTube memberships, where you get early videos, access to the members only Discord, my Nintendo Switch friend code, and exclusive content such as long-form interviews with other YouTubers. In addition to all that good stuff, you'll also, if you sign up, get your name read out at the end of each video, just like these lovely people. Just for a notice, I am away when I'm reading this video, so if the names aren't updated, that is why. They will be updated when I return. I hope that's okay. LFR, Ahmed bin Motaradzi, Taylor Wood, Trecoy, Ariella, Hannah, Proquar, Robin Thomas, Emily Eisenberg, Kathy 1410 Itchy, Danielle von Hamelin, Big Lil Boat, George Geddes, Kira B, No Sparking Heart, Corey, Gianna J, Mighty Than the Sword, Carolyn, Imogen Q, Luciano Frias Andrade, Adam, Harry, Ndog191, Cav, Quesadilla de Tortilla Azul, Leron, Adam Lees, Daniel Neville, No Not That Paul, MB, Wondering Wonder, Lex Phoenix, Ender, Curtis, It's Mira D, Jade Senior, Boa Ear, James W, Mother Endor, Thorngill, Bob the Builder, 5445554, Deborah Laboon, Vegas, Zilla Zathanium, Vince Whitaker, Amelia Lissette, Jason Haig, Frank McManus, Susan Foster, Helena Real, Sierra Whiskey, Ali Catgill, John N, Lloyd Luciente, Jason Cribbett, Shield Daden, Robin Podolsky, Nightlight Plushy Jesus, Manta Ray, Courtney Burmack, Sleepy Slug, Philippa Tabrogga, Soma Piglet, Brain Douche, Artie Wolf, Greg Noble, Deanna McMillan, Caroline Regalado, Alexandra Lilly, PJ Lisbrel, Howard Lott, Nerania Scarjan, Melissa Allen Buttburglar, Ataxis Builds Things, Sarah Francesca Smith, and Rachel. Thank you all. Have a lovely and blessed week. Blessed, that's a weird thing to say. Have a non-religious good week. Unless you are religious, in which case, feel free to add your religion to it. Okay, goodbye.